केसरिया से मन जोगी हुआ रे, दिल झूमे देखो पतवारा हुआ रे, केसरिया से मन जोगी हुआ।
हर पल मनाओ केसरी त्योहार। विमल, बोलो जुबां केसरी।
The Newshour Special Edition.
Namaskar, good evening. I am Swati Joshi and you're watching our special broadcast, the one where we talk about all aspects of the most dramatic, daring rescue operation carried out in the Iranian territory by the US forces. This is a story straight out of a war thriller, but this time it's real. After hours behind enemy lines, hiding, evading, surviving, the second crew member of the downed US F-15E has been successfully rescued. US media and authorities have now confirmed the airman who ejected after the fighter jet was shot down over Iran managed to evade capture using advanced survival training. Now, as per reports, he was hiding on an elevated ridge, moving away from the wreckage, from the crash site, and activating an emergency beacon. But what followed was even more dramatic as Iranian forces closed in. Elite US Special Operations Unit launched a high-risk, multi-layered combat search and rescue mission under heavy fire, with helicopters taking hits and ground forces engaging hostile units. US Special Forces went in and they brought him out. Multiple US officials now confirm that the crew member has been extracted, and US forces, everyone involved in the operation, they are all safe and out of Iran. Now, this was not just a rescue, this was a daring operation deep inside hostile territory in the middle of a raging war. This was a full-scale combat rescue executed under fire. So what does this mean for a conflict that is clearly escalating by the hour? Let's break down the details of what we know so far about the rescue operation, what transpired on ground. This is how the rescue operation was carried out. These are the basic details that have come to fore. The US airman was rescued, was a weapon system operator on board that F-15 jet. His rank was that of a colonel. We're given to understand that he has sustained injuries during the entire process of ejection and rescue operation, but has now been reported to be safe and sound. This is what was reported initially. So Iran shot down the F-15E and the jet was destroyed right after the impact was felt. The crew ejected safely, one pilot, one weapon system operator. The WSO hiked away from the wreckage, hiked away from the crash site and hid on an elevated ridge. He also avoided, of course, the Iranian hunters. He was successfully able to evade them using the SCRE technique, activated the emergency beacon that sent out signals that was only heard by the US forces. Now, this is how the rescue unfolded. The location was monitored for 24 hours continuously. Rescue teams were sent into the Iranian territory to find where the WSO was. Dozens of aircrafts were deployed to provide air cover as well. Most lethal weapons were used during this entire rescue operation, and then ultimately it resulted in the successful exfiltration of the crew member. Let's take a look at more details that have come to fore. Now, this is what the airmen did after the crash happened. Hiked up a 7,000-foot ridge line. This is all as per US media reports. He took shelter in a mountain crevice to avoid the Iranian hunters, to avoid people who were also trying to get access of him so that they could capture him. Now, he carefully evaded the Iranian forces for more than 24 hours and used the emergency beacon to establish contact with the authorities. The signals were received. He was located by the CIA only after a day. And then the information about his location was sent to Pentagon. That's how they were able to track the airman, the WSO weapon system operator on board the F-15E jet. Let me quickly introduce our guests. We have my colleague Sanjay joining us here on the broadcast. Along with him is Lt General Sanjay Kulkarni, defense analyst, and Air Commodore A.S. Bahal, ex-Indian Air Force fighter pilot. Thank you very much for joining us. Commodore, I want to begin with you. The most dramatic, daring operation. Donald Trump said this hasn't happened in the history of United States of America. And indeed, it looks like a scene straight out of a Hollywood movie.
Swati, it's one of the most riskiest missions that you can undertake. There have been more failures than successes, but nothing succeeds like success. So that is why he's taking all the credit. But let me tell you the failure, one failure example first. Remember Black Hawk Down, that movie which came 1993, Mogadishu? 19 Americans died and 73 were injured in that. And now when we look at this, when they rescued the first, in F-15 there are two pilots. One is the pilot, other is a weapon systems operator. So pilot was rescued straight away, but it is the weapon systems operator that had ejected in this territory which is called Zagros Mountains. You know, just on the plateau of Zagros Mountains he's fallen. Imagine had he fallen on mountain territory, he would have got more hit, more damage to himself. More injured to himself. Injury to himself. So now when we are looking at this, he's come down. He's taken the first corrective action, and that corrective action is to move away from the crash site. There are two different tribes which operate there. Both are highly Iranian, means they have that Iranian blood in them. And they were searching for him. Plus, 3 kilometers away, there was an Iranian IRGC location from where they were also moving to find him. This is the time the Americans used 2 US-60 Black Hawk helicopters. These operations are known as combat search and rescue. Now, what happens when you eject? You have a personal survival pack underneath you. So once you come down on parachute, like it is being shown just now.
The AI-generated video, yes.
And when you land and touch down, the PSP you can open out. You have 48 hours emergency food rations. You have a small revolver. And at the same time, you also have a personal locator beacon. Personal locator beacon. What this beacon does is that when you activate it, it starts giving emergency distress signals which are picked up by the responders either in the helicopters which were sent for rescue or the CIA personnel if they have that specialized equipment, if they have it. And then when these aircraft come, they home on to the exact location. The initial crash site gives you the GPS coordinates of that place. And they also have GPS trackers and satellite communication devices in your personal survival pack. The most modern aircraft have it. So he may have also used any of these. And then the helicopters come and there is a suppressive fire which is given so that those 3 kilometers away IRGC personnel don't come in when the rescue is taking place. And that was given by MQ-9 Reaper.
The air cover was given by the aircraft.
Reapers.
Yes.
That is their drones which have Hellfire missiles and also a lot of other air-to-ground weapon systems. In addition to that, they tried to land a C-130J aircraft in the forward post well inside Iran, and that got heavily damaged, and that could not that was one loss that they suffered. Also the UH-60 aircraft, Black Hawk helicopter, which has about 11 combat crews, that was also damaged, but it went back and landed.
And as we
fighter squadron. And when these aircraft come, either they winch up that guy if he's in a condition to get himself winched, or they land there and he comes in and then they take him back. But see, the risk factor. They lost one C-130J, one US-60 was also hit. Now, but imagine if you are successful like it happened, and I'm telling you, Trump is extremely lucky, as my friend was telling some time back. He is extremely lucky that this mission became successful, and that's why they could rescue. Otherwise, imagine if C-130J aircraft, both the pilots had been killed, or UH-60 had come down and the pilots were killed, or they were captured. Now you have more pilots getting killed to rescue one pilot.
Absolutely.
But in any case, imagine when you tell your people that when you eject in enemy territory and you are in harm's way, when everybody is in enemy, we get inside and bring you back safely.
So you're saying the biggest factor that you don't know in this entire game is the territory where you're going to land, and then you have to deal with the situation there.
See, Swati, not that they really don't know because they haven't seen it, but they've been briefed on it. They know the territory well because they know where they're going to be flying on, because before they take off a flight, they're being briefed very well. Notwithstanding all that, that confidence the pilot must have, or the co-pilot must have, on his own troops,
Absolutely.
his own country, that he will be rescued. The advantage that he had, the pilot was rescued. So he knew that the Americans know that one had been rescued and he will be rescued. Not just that, his own self-motivation level has to be extremely high. You can be trained any number of times. But the fact that he knows, when he knows that there are people around there who are likely to chase him, he knows he's in the enemy territory, he will only move at night. He doesn't move during the day. You could be calling it anymore. He knows he's equipped with 48 hours of ration. He has the medical equipment with him. He has water with him. He has all the basic necessity. He has a survival blanket with him, a small little thing. He can do all that. But notwithstanding that, to be able to tell yourself that, yes, there's someone coming, and constantly thereafter, the rescue being taken place. And not just at one place, there are 2-3 decoy escapes happening at the same time, because the Iranians themselves don't know. Plus a reward of over $60,000 announced
Absolutely.
by the RGC to anyone who can pick him up. So that money is something which is driving them to catch him. He is escaping from there, getting onto a height to be able to get weight to it. All of it, I think 100%. It was an Easter gift to the president or to the United States of America. It's not easy. It's just not easy. We've seen people who get stuck in avalanches. We know people who get stuck in crevices. What happens? That as long as the person knows he will be rescued, his morale is high.
So he got the confidence from the fact that the first one was rescued. Also, you're saying that the training can only prepare you, but to be able to execute that on ground.
Very difficult. 36 hours you haven't slept. Firstly, the tension of having flown over there, then having crashed. And thereafter, then you can't even sleep for a minute. You're alert at all times. You can well imagine somebody has to go through like this a situation. It's very, very difficult.
So I think what he's saying is extremely important. You know, why is it important? When was that training carried out? Nobody knows. It's not happened just before the war. It could have happened many years back. And to understand and remember each and every aspect of that training, despite having undergone it in a friendly environment. Now, if you have to undergo it in a hostile environment, all generous points are extremely valid.
Now, Sanjay, sir said that, good that it was successful, but there have been failures. And that's something that Iran reminded America of today through their various posts, mocking America, reminding them of what transpired in 1979.
Yes, you're right. The thing with that is the fact that here, regardless of how dangerous it was, how difficult it was about one man or two men. At that time, it involved an entire embassy in the middle of Tehran. So to get that many people out in 1979, the technology would not have been what it is today. Secondly, when you're trying to get 70, 80 people out from the middle of Tehran, you can imagine it would have been a lot more difficult. Of course, it failed. And the results of that failure, the consequences of the failure were enormous. One of the reasons why President Carter lost that election, there were other reasons, inflation being one, the state of the world being another, but the fact that it failed. And if it had succeeded, if all 70, 80 people had come out, it would have been a resounding success. Who knows? He may have won re-election. We would not have had President Reagan as president in 1984, so 80 and 84. So all these things have to be kept in mind. In this case, Swati, the fact is that if we have to look at the what if he had been captured, it would have been a huge propaganda success for the Iranians, a huge information warfare success for the Iranians. And equally importantly, how would President Trump, who already faces political problems at home because of this war, how would he have explained it to the people of America in the middle of Easter? These are difficult questions, but nothing ever succeeds like success. This is a huge success, and naturally the president himself will take credit for it.
So two aspects which we'll discuss after we take a look at more details. Two aspects you're saying: one, the repercussions if the entire operation would have failed, and two, what if the Iranians would really have managed to capture this airman alive? Would they have used him as a bargaining chip? We'll discuss that. We'll come to it later. Let's take a look at more details here on the big screen. Let's talk about the challenges involved in a rescue operation like this, especially a mountainous terrain for the airmen also. And Sanjay, maybe you can join me in explaining this a bit here. This is the location that we are looking at. The exact location, of course, Sanjay, is not known. But this is situated somewhere, like the Commodore said, within the Zagros mountain range. So what are the challenges in a mountainous terrain like this, Commodore?
See, the major challenges that take place is that there are huge forests, oak forests, which are there between 2,000 to 4,000 meters in this terrain.
The summit, yes.
Exactly. And then there are deep crevices, there are deep steep falls, there are deep valleys. And in addition to that, if the pilot is coming down a mountain range, he may not be able to land in the correct landing posture, with the result he can break his legs or damage himself or injure himself very badly. So fortunately, he landed on a small plateau which was close to the two different mountain ranges. The second thing that comes up, which is extremely important, is because of the trees that are there in the forest, you cannot pick up that person. Even if your helicopter comes overhead, you are unable to pick up that person. You are unable to see him. You are unable to come down. And how do you winch him up? Because of the huge trees that are over there. So all these make it challenging. But can I just come here and say that if you look at this, where is the US-60 come from? The nearest place is Kuwait, but it's not come from Kuwait. So then it's come from Iraq. So the nearest one here is Basra. From Basra, do they operate? No. They operate from Victory Base in Baghdad, which is somewhere over here. And they operate from Anbar Base, which is over here. So that's why they needed air-to-air refueling here. Because the range of these helicopters is 600 kilometers, they needed an air-to-air refueling just before coming in, and that's how these operations took place. Now imagine if the US-60s come in. Now in this whole territory, they don't know which is the place where air defense systems, especially those man pads, that is man-portable air defense systems, which home on with the IR signature. That's the one which hit the A-10 aircraft. So they could be anywhere in this area. And these helicopters are flying at about 250 to 300 kilometers an hour. They are sitting duck. And that is why even from small arms, one of the US-60 was hit and some of their crew were also damaged.
Absolutely.
So it's a highly risky mission when you fly deep inside enemy territory and you're flying and picking up people. But look at the morale that you mentioned and the general mentioned. It is a great morale booster if you can pull it off, and look at the president thereafter. He's seen as a hero.
Now, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, I want you to also talk about how the claims of United States and specifically Donald Trump have been busted through the fact that their aircrafts are being hit. Yes, they've carried out the mission successfully, but it also goes on to show that all the claims of obliterating Iran or completely finishing off their air defense systems is not true on ground.
See, nothing would be 100%, but to a large extent, yes, to what he's claiming. If it hadn't been that claim, they would not have been able to rescue this pilot. So that's very important. The fact that they could conduct this operation, the fact that they could fly all over to be able to find out where exactly he is, to be able to rescue is indicative that they had air superiority. Just not that. Imagine the Iranian television had already started showing some person, David, on the screen to say that, well, look, we will release this pilot if we release 10,000 Palestinians. Look at the way. So all this is happening, and just then on the Truth Social, we find President Trump has said this. So there is already propaganda on from the Iranian side, and despite that, to be able to do all this, I think it's a marvel. It's absolutely very professional. I give full marks to the kind of desire to ensure that our man must be rescued, the self-motivation of the pilot that he will be rescued, and third, that the entire nation stand behind him to rescue and succeed in rescuing him. I think it could be better. Had it not happened, let's put it this way, that it doesn't happen the way the Americans had wanted it. Can you imagine what would have happened?
The bargaining chip point, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Green, who speaks English, it wasn't, and they said he's David or whatever that means. So, release 10,000 Palestinians. They could well have used this as an opportunity. If the Iranians wanted to end the war,
could have changed the entire game on ground.
Honorable way, they could have well said that we hand over the pilot, we will carry on with the war if you desire, but you take the pilot. You think the Americans would have gone on for further operation? Definitely not. They would have said, okay, let's quit and come on, let's get on to the negotiating table.
Absolutely.
So both ways it could have worked. But I think the way the Iranians are, And Iranians are not being dictated by anybody than IRGC, who are bent upon ensuring that the war goes, they think, their way, and I hope it goes their way, but it seems very difficult because after all, morale also requires something to be able to sustain itself, and that is very difficult for the Iranians at this point of time to sustain that high morale which is there. Right now, the Iranian morale is very high, but now the American morale is shot up, and they will now retaliate should anything happen.
Sends out a big message there for the Americans, the common man there as well. Now, before we talk about the losses as far as the US is concerned, which is mounting for them, Sanjay, earlier in our interaction during one of the broadcasts, you said that the message that goes out from the top as far as the US is concerned is that they are willing to lose aircrafts but not their man on ground.
Exactly. What is the choice before any army? The basic point is the man on the ground is more important than all the material. The important point here is the Americans decided we want these two guys back. We want our two pilots back, our pilot and our Wizzo. And for that, if we have to lose the F-15 was lost in any case. If we have to lose a C-130 transport aircraft, if we have to lose 2 helicopters, doesn't matter. It's just a few $1 million. But our men are more important than all the material. And that is a very important message you send to your soldiers. That look, regardless of the cost, our goal, our objective, our primary objective is to get you back. And that is what allows these soldiers to fight, to have high morale, and hope and have the training to say that, look, these guys want to get me back. I will do my best to ensure that I stay out of the reach of the Iranians. I do my best to make my return, to facilitate the entire process. So it's a huge success in terms of getting someone from behind. I mean, this will be made into a film in 2 years. You will see Hollywood. This is just, as they say, the trailer. Hollywood is going to make a film like this in about 2 years.
Absolutely. And that's why I said it looks like, straight out of a Hollywood movie already. Let's quickly take a look at the losses that we were talking about in terms of the aircrafts that have been shot down off the United States of America ever since the entire operation began, and part of this rescue operation as well. And Sanjay, maybe you can comment on this. The E-3G Sentry, it was hit by the Iranian missiles in Saudi Arabia. Then
yes. That was eye in the sky that went down. Then this should worry the Americans a little bit. The fact that 3 F-15s went down because of friendly fire, and then a 4th. So 4 F-15s have been shot down in different ways. Now, is this a message to the Americans about the F-15? We don't know.
So you have the E-3G, you have the F-15E and A-10C.
The Warthog. Now, the Warthog is a relatively old plane. It was designed and developed for a completely different reason. This was a worry the Americans had about the Cold War getting hot. And the one way to stop the surge of Soviet tanks in the Central European plains was the A-10, the Warthog.
Yes, now Commodore
That
Bahal
was the big thing. Now it's still in use, and it, of course, one has been lost.
Commodore Bahal, then there are others.
The Black Hawks damaged. You have the F-16, which went down. No one is sure why it went down, but it was an emergency, some other problem. C-130s we've talked about because, very simple, it was a choice. Do we get the man out? Do we get the planes, save the planes? The choice is always the man. And then finally, the 2 C-130s and then the military transport plane. That's fine. If you have to save a man, you can sacrifice this kind of material, especially the Americans. I mean, if you have a defense budget of $1.2 trillion, a couple of planes don't really matter so much.
You wanted to comment earlier.
Yeah, Swati, I want to say 2 things about this. We may be drawing a wrong lesson by saying that such missions are possible every time and that such missions will succeed. Now, that lesson cannot be taken here. For example, when we had this KC-135s doing some formation flying and one of them crashed, all the 6 crew died in that. Now, we are looking at here where, like I said earlier, Trump has been extremely lucky. Now, if we look at any other incident, there have been very rarely instances where it has succeeded, maybe 1 or 2. Most places these missions have failed. But more important than that is, if America is thinking of putting boots on ground and it thinks that having this mission done, they have been successful, or Venezuela done, they have been successful, they'll be successful in Iran, especially when they go for Kharg Islands or for the Straits of Hormuz Islands, those 6-7 of them, or if they think of going and getting the 440 kgs enriched uranium, they're going to be in for a big surprise. There'll be huge amount of losses. And then what is going to be one man you're going to save when you're going to put most of them in the arms
You're
race?
raising a very important question. Lieutenant Gen Kulkarni, boots on ground, is that really still an option for US?
Well, this particular operation would be able to convey to America is not easy. At a place far away from Tehran, and the mountainous terrain, you had people hunting for the American. If that be so, then you know the Americans have actually been able to, I would say, war game their own boots on ground, and may think it otherwise, and would rather soften the targets before they attempt even to go for having boots on ground. It's not going to be easy. The very fact that this mission, just the losses on this one small mission, the losses were colossal.
Absolutely.
And if that be so, boots on ground are not going to be easy. I think it's enough an indicator to the Americans that boots on ground probably they may have to rethink.
Now, Sanjay, one last point before we talk about the Strait of Hormuz and the other threats and indications that are coming in about the message. Earlier, till this point, there was a lot of internal backlash that Donald Trump was facing. His popularity was dwindling. But what would this do? This rescue operation, a successful one, what would this do for him electorally?
Temporarily, it will give him a boost. Temporarily, certainly it will give him a boost. But the war isn't going away. And then, as the general said about boots on the ground, what kind of boots? On what ground? Are you going to have boots on the ground in Kharg Island? That's difficult enough. Are you going to have boots on the ground in the mainland? That's much more difficult. So these are risks that will have to be looked at. Because for one man or two men, so much effort was made. If you're going to have a lot of soldiers, and for Kharg Island, you'll probably need the Marines, you'll probably need the 82nd Airborne, which is one of the crack divisions that the Army has, but there are bound to be losses. And in a situation like this, in America, election year, inflation already high, gasoline prices hitting $4 and plus $4. It could be more. And if you're going to have losses, then how is it going to look in the elections?
Absolutely.
How is it going to look for the president?
He has to decide whether to go in for it or not to do it.
But he has issued ultimatums already. I mean, as far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned. Meanwhile, the focus has also shifted to Bab al-Mandeb. Why is that? Let's take a look at what we are talking about here. Why does it matter? Why is it significant? It is a key strait which is located on the Red Sea. Why has it become significant? What is it? So the key strait which is located on the Red Sea, we're talking about the Bab al-Mandeb. Here it is on the map. This is what we're talking about, the strait. The entire focus shifts to that. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, remember, has already issued an ultimatum as far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned, which of course the Iranians are not willing at the moment to accept, or their reaction to it has been that you cannot issue us such diktats. Why are we talking about Bab al-Mandeb? It's connected. It connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. That portion that has been highlighted over there in the map. It is situated between Djibouti and Yemen. Now, Sanjay, it accounts for 14% of global trade. If anything happens here, any movement restricted, once again, it sends the entire world into a tizzy. It's a major transit route for fossil fuels. Transits 4.2 million barrels oil per day. The impact of closure, we are explaining it here on the big screen, it could block crude bound for Asia. So once again, forces vessels to take longer routes. That means the situation domestically keeps changing, and that builds mounts a lot of pressure on governments across the world, leaders across the world. It will lead to skyrocketing oil prices. So ultimately, the common man feels the pinch, Sanjay.
Yes, the point is, the Bab el-Mandeb here, the people who are right here are the Houthis. Now, you look at it both ways. First of all, the Houthis, what have they done lately? They have fired a ballistic missile at Israel, which was intercepted. But naturally, if you're going to have ships going this way, they are easier targets. The whole point is, have they done it? So far, not yet. Could they do it? Well, that's entirely possible. The dangers for that, it's a dangerous situation. The point is, who's going to be affected? Now, the Saudis have a port here. It is entirely possible that their fuel supplies to Europe, up the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean to Greece and Italy and everywhere else, that is comparatively safer. But if there's stuff going through here, towards India, towards South Korea, towards Japan, towards China, that's where the trouble is. So far, the Bab el-Mandeb has been quiet, roughly quiet. One ballistic missile has gone towards Israel. The Americans have softened the Houthis up a while ago, but we don't know how strong they are. We don't know how many missiles they have. We don't know what other weapons they have. We don't know what targets they are planning. So it's a gray area as far as knowing their intentions are concerned. But you would imagine that everyone should be prepared for the worst.
Okay. Commodore Bahal wants to come in.
Yeah. See, this place is just 29 kilometers wide. There is a Yanbu port over here where they have an east-west pipeline. So this is kind of an alternative to Straits of Hormuz. And that pipeline is about 1,200 kilometers long, and it has 7 million barrels per day of oil coming from here, 2 for their own consumption, and 5 million barrels that go like this skirting. Now that gets affected. That is the important. Second and most important thing is, if you look at this area, this is all high ground. And here is Eritrea, and here is Djibouti. And Djibouti has the Chinese naval base over here. In this high ground, they can use those drone boats, they can use anti-ship missiles, they can use any of the drones as well as ballistic missiles that have been given by the Iranians. Secondly, they have a Karaman island and a port over here. Now that can actually choke this off. So if this gets choked off, we have 10 to 12% of global trade coming from here stopped. 20% from here stopped. 1/3 of oil supply, oil prices may shoot 150. You're coming from Cape of Good Hope. That itself means at least $1 million increase in freight, increase in also the time, 10 to 14 days. India's exports towards Europe use this. So now even if Iran doesn't want our ships to go, but Houthis you cannot say, and again, they don't have to shoot down every ship. Even if they are able to get 1 or 2 here, the entire supply chain gets disrupted.
So you then have multiple maritime choke points, Lt Gen Kulkarni. Is this going to force more people to get involved?
See, Djibouti itself is about 30 kilometers from Yemen, coastline. Djibouti have Americans, about 4,000. Chinese, about 1,000. You have Japanese, you have the French, you have the Germans, Indians going up and down. A trade route which takes approximately 20,000 ships per year. That's a huge thing. India alone has all its pharmaceuticals, engineering, all of it go to this Red Sea route. So Bab el-Mandeb is something which they can attempt to block, and Houthis have yet not done all that. But should they get involved into it, yes, with the Strait of Hormuz weaponized, Bab el-Mandeb weaponized, it is not going to be easy. Everybody, like rightly said, the entire world is going to suffer. 35% of the world's trade passing through either through the Strait of Hormuz or through Bab el-Mandeb. It's not going to be easy. Egyptians might lose $7 billion because that's the money they collect for Suez Canal. So it's not going to be easy. Weaponizing it, I think the Iranians have found the pressure point, and they are going to be ensuring it that they use it to the best of their benefits for bargaining as much as they could. But I think the Americans will keep Bab al-Mandeb open. They will also ensure before maybe the 15th of April, even the Strait of Hormuz will be kept open.
This is a geographical advantage.
Yeah.
You know, there's no other way to describe it. They worked on the Strait of Hormuz. They realized that this would be a weapon. This is the biggest weapon they have. And this, too, is a weapon of a very serious kind. They realize that this asymmetrical way of fighting would actually suit them the best.
Yes.
Let's in fact also take a look at what Iran can do. Let's fire those pointers here on the big screen. This is what Iran could do. They could involve pro-Iran Houthi rebels. Here it is. So they could involve pro-Iran Houthi rebels who are based in Yemen. That's what our experts have been talking about. Houthis recently threatened to target the strait. There are previous instances. Houthis disrupted transit during the Gaza war in 2023. Vessels that were linked to Israel were targeted in Houthi attacks. So the Houthis are also divided. Stranger, Iran could ask them to help Iran through the attacks?
Yes, that is an option. But the only thing is, they've been hit very hard by the Americans a while ago. So how much they have, what kind of weapons they have, how many missiles they have, how many rockets they have, we don't know. But conversely, it's a very narrow strait.
Absolutely.
And you don't require very sophisticated weapons. You get a boat, fill it with explosives, aim it at one of the tankers coming in, and if the tanker is sunk or if it's very badly damaged, for a long while the strait is closed. Then what does the world do?
Absolutely. That puts a lot of pressure on everyone who depends on these routes. And like I said, domestically, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the leaders, global leaders. Now, we had earlier about 40 countries, India was also part of it, have a dialogue discussion on ensuring how to open the Strait of Hormuz. What are we going to do about this?
There is an operational Aspidis, which is continuing, which has multinational forces and the ships. Even India did contribute. It's not part of Aspidis. We have about 23 naval ships in this region, and we keep rotating them. So those ships can escort, but they cannot force to open the Mandab Straits. So for opening the Mandab Straits, you have to hit at the Houthis. The problem is what we were talking of is Houthis till now have not engaged. It is not because of lack of weapon systems. Let me assure you, 2023-24, they did get hit very badly, even 2025 early part. But from then they are recouping. So they have been recouped by Iran. They are waiting for the right time.
Okay, let's quickly take a look at why India is watching this closely, and Lt Gen Kulkarni, you can come in on that as we discuss the India aspect of this. Why India is watching this closely? As far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned, it's the pathway for 40% of crude for India. India receives 90% of LPG via this route, the Strait of Hormuz. Transits 70 to 80% of oil and LNG to Asia. Then the Bab al-Mandeb Strait accounts for 14% of global maritime trade. Major transit route for 5% global oil produced. That's the reason why India is watching the developments very closely. It's also the transit route for 80% Indian merchandise to EU.
That's very important, Swati, because all our exports, pharmaceutical, engineering, chemical, all of it passes to Europe. So that's going to affect us very badly. Of course, the Strait of Hormuz, because over 80% of our gas is coming from Qatar, and that is totally stopped. So that is one thing that we really need to be concerned about. A whole lot of GCC countries are under pressure. Either the desalination plants being hit, refineries being hit, ports being hit, airports being hit, so the infrastructure being damaged. So you find the Strait of Hormuz, despite that, our good relations with Iran, fortunately, that at least some tankers and containers are coming in. Otherwise, it would have been extremely difficult. But knowing all this, you suddenly find at Bab al-Mandeb, adjoining Djibouti, Israel recognizes Somaliland. Now, Somaliland is part of Somalia. Now, half of it is Somaliland, which the Israelis have recognized. The only country to recognize Somaliland. So you find the Yemenis also, or the Houthis there, can't rest at peace because the Israelis have also already moved in. So they're at Somaliland. Djibouti have got Americans, a huge base. 4,000 people there, Chinese there, French there, Germans there, Japanese there, Indian ships, as they say, are moving up and down. So it's not going to be so easy. Plus Egyptians' entire revenue, $7 billion being earned from Suez Canal. So everyone's interested in ensuring that this is kept open. If not, then of course it's Cape of Good Hope. That's the only way that hope is left, is to pass the Cape of Good Hope. Notwithstanding that, we do suffer in terms of exports. We do suffer in terms of logistics, fetching up the duration of it, the kind of freight, the kind of insurance, all of it. But we're still, I would say, better off than most of the countries, because our ships, our tankers are still coming through the Strait of Hormuz and sustaining and at least being able to keep the prices where they are. None of us are suffering like most of our neighboring countries are.
And the situation is far worse, Sanjay, in our neighboring countries. When you talk about Indian ships, Indian flag ships being allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz or carry whatever oil or crude or LPG it has till now, it's also because of diplomacy.
Yes, very deft diplomacy. The fact that we have good relations, long civilization links with the Iranians. We have good relations with the Israelis and the Americans, so that's helped. Also, India has reserves, and India has got to a stage where India is actually helping oil-deficient neighbors. We have sent a certain amount of oil to some neighboring countries with good reason, because they needed much more than we do at this point. But everything said, the longer this war lasts, the more difficult it is going to be, not just for only India, but for the world. I mean, you think of, as a very worrying statement, you think of the Gulf countries, you think of the kind of damage they have faced and will face. You think of Israel, you think of Iran, but think of the Gulf countries. They were some great bastion of security. Now, okay, they have the money, but they will probably need a technological version of what was the Marshall Plan of the 1940s in Europe, Western Europe, because if their desalination plants are damaged, if their refineries are damaged, if their other infrastructure is damaged, if their highways are hit, then you need technology, you need infrastructural help, and all of that means some equivalent of a Marshall Plan.
Absolutely. And also, you know, the recovery post-war is going to take a really long time. It's not like the war ends today and from tomorrow things go back to normal, Commodore Bahal.
Exactly. Now, if we look at the Pars gas field that had been attacked, or the gas fields in Qatar that were attacked, we are looking at 3 to 5 years. 17% of the gas has now been stopped. So which implies it's got a long-term recuperation time. In addition to this, if you remember the 1980s Iran-Iraq war, they had completely destroyed Kharg Island terminals. But it took them a few years, 5 years, but they did build up all the terminals again. And today, of course, they are at a very high rate, 7 to 9 million barrels per day they are exporting from there. But what I'm coming to is that even after this war gets stopped, there will be a long recuperation time before everything comes to normal. And there will be increase in fuel prices in India very soon, because you cannot sustain buying fuel anywhere from 120 to 136 to 137 dollars per barrel. And remember, India, though, is the third largest importer of crude oil, fourth largest refiner, and fifth largest exporter of refined oil. That is why we have this margin where we are able to help out our neighbors, and where in Pakistan today they are saying the government has told them to use cycles. Because second time they have increased the prices to above, that is 60 to 65% increase in prices from the original prices about a month back.
We have felt the heat a little bit, of course, in terms of the commercial LPGs, commercial LPG cylinder connections and all. But for how long can any government, continue providing relief in face of the war there intensifying? For how long can you cap the hike? Is a big challenge.
It's very important for the Indians themselves to understand. I'm sure everyone's very wise in India. You talk to the taxi drivers, you talk to anyone on the street, they all understand. We must not do rumor mongering. That's very important. Greed must be curbed. The needs of all will be met. There's no denying the fact Yes, we may have to shed a little more extra cash because the entire world is suffering. But they aren't suffering as much as the world is suffering. In that context, yes. But the second thing I would rather say, at least the existential threat of Israel seems to have evaporated. Now, at least Israel can breathe that there is no existential threat for Israel, and that itself should be enough to bring in peace in the world for at least the next 50 years. That's how I look at it.
Sanjay, last comments?
Yes. The whole point is that everybody wants the war to end quickly.
Absolutely.
And President Trump has made it very clear he wants a ceasefire in 48 hours. The question is, will there be a forward movement? Will someone somewhere say, look, we won? If the president says that, look, we won, we've already achieved everything we wish to. And if you've achieved everything you wish to operationally, then why do you want to fight a war? But is this something the Iranians will agree to? They are the ones that have been damaged. They have been hit very hard. So what is it that they want to do? So we still don't know how the next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be. Regardless of what happens, it means enormous amount of worry for much of the world.
Absolutely. Now, yes, the rescue operation was successful, but that does not mean that this is over. In fact, given the developments taking place on ground, looks like it's far from over. The situation only escalating on ground at the moment. And the only hope that the world has is that the situation resolves, that both sides agree to come on the talking table and announce that the war is going to end. Despite that, even if that happens, the situation is not going to normalize, even if the war is, let's say, announced to have been ended today. So we all have to be prepared. Most importantly, the governments across the world leaders are pinning their hope on some sort of a dialogue, some sort of a diplomacy that India has been talking about for a long time, that the only resolution can come out through dialogue and diplomacy. That has been India's stand all along. Thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast with your expert opinion. Thank you to our viewers for watching us.
The News Hour Special Edition.